الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. Respected elders, brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. One of the conditions that we have been told for the acceptance of ziyarah wherever you and I go is an understanding and an acknowledgement of the person, the personality whom we are coming to visit and pay our respects towards. In other words, when we stand at the gate at the entrance of the mausoleum of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and when we inshallah get the tawfiq to go to Karbala, the important idea that comes to our mind is the need to understand this individual, his life and his teachings. At the same time, when we come to Wadi-us-Salaam, this valley of peace, this land, according to historical records, was purchased by none other than Prophet Adam, ala nabiyyina wa ala alihi wa alayhi afdalus salatu wassalam. If I can get your attention away from the water distributor. This particular land was purchased by Prophet Ibrahim, because when he came here, when he was passing from Babylon, the weather situation here changed due to his barakah, the presence. And the people around this area emphasized that he would stay, and therefore he purchased this land. Later on, of course, this is considered to be one of the biggest cemeteries in the world. It has graves of millions, literally millions of human beings for over thousands of years. This area is also known for housing the remains of the two great prophets of God, Prophet Hud and Prophet Salih alayhi salam. And it's important for us, before we go to perform the ziyarah, to have a slight understanding of their biographies and their lives. Because today, if we're asked a question about Prophet Hud and Prophet Salih, many of us would stare and would have blank faces. Yes, I've heard their names. I know chapter 11 of the Holy Quran is Surah Hud, but that's all that I know. And therefore, when we come to recite the ziyarah, we need to have a slight understanding as to the significance, because when we recite ziyarah of Amir al-Mu'mineen, we find the following sentence. Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen wa ala dhaji'ayka Adam wa Nuh wa ala jarayka Hud wa Salih. In other words, we recite the salam towards the prophets who were buried next to Amir al-Mu'mineen, who were Adam and Nuh, and to his neighbors. In other words, Hud and Salih. Prophet Hud, brothers and sisters, is mentioned 24 times in the Holy Quran. And when Allah mentions a prophet 24 times in the Quran, this is not coincidental. This has an indication, or this is a message for you and I to study his life and to understand what he achieved and the challenges that he faced and he overcame. His community were known as what? Were known as Ad. And his community lived in the southern parts of Arabia, in the Arabian Peninsula, and they had a number of distinguishing features. They were huge in size. In other words, the youngest or the smallest was 7 meters, and according to historical records, the biggest was 50 meters tall in terms of their height. They used to live for a long period of time. 400 years was the average lifespan, and they used to carve houses from mountains. This is the community of Ad. Yet at the same time, they were disobedient and they worshipped idols. And Prophet Hud alayhi salam came to them with the message of monotheism and the obedience to the absolute perfect being, and that's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He preached this message, which is the message of all the prophets. For many years, they would be disobedient, they would turn their backs against him, they would annoy him. Eventually, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would send their punishment. Yet before the punishment was sent, there was an interesting story that you and I need to be aware of. And that is the story of a king at the time of Prophet Hud known as Shaddad. His brother Shadid was a man who was virtuous. And when he passed away, this ruthless king named Shaddad, according to narrations, from the Holy Fifth Imam, Imam Mohammad al-Baqir, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, was approached by Prophet Hud alayhi salam. Prophet Hud said to him that this is a message that I bring to you for salvation in this world and the akhirah. He said, what is the reward if I was to follow you? Prophet Hud explained to him the features of paradise. He said to him, in paradise you'll find nothing that will be comprehended by your mind, nothing that you can see or even think about. He said, for example, Prophet Hud would describe to him the features of Jannah. He would say you would walk not on grass, not on sand, but you will walk on musk. This is the smell sound that you will hear, you will smell. At the same time, you will describe to him the characteristics. This man would then decide to build paradise on earth. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Al-Fajr. أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ فَعَلَ رَبُّكَ بِعَادٍ إِرَمَ ذَاتِ الْعِمَادِ. The city of Iram was constructed in Sham, and it's known to be one of the most beautiful cities ever constructed in the history of mankind. This particular king, Shaddad, used over 3,000 workers over a period of 10 years to construct in his image paradise. So he ordered the best ornaments, anything that could be bought from around the world, to be brought to the city of Iram. Hud alayhi salam would say to him, this is in vain, you are wasting your time. But he would not, of course, listen. When it was the time to open the city of Iram, narrations mention in history that this particular king, Shaddad, mounted on his horse, and he took his entourage from southern Arabia, Yemen today, and he went towards Sham. On his journey, according to the narration from Abu Hazrat Ali, from the 5th Imam, he was somewhat attracted by a deer whom he liked, and he started to follow it. He left his people, the people who were with him, he was riding on a horse, until the deer took him to a no man's land, an area which was a barren desert. He stood there not knowing what to do. He saw a creation of God that he'd never seen before. As soon as he wanted to speak to that creation of God, the creation spoke to him and said, I am the angel of death, and I'm here to take your soul. This particular king said to him, hold on a minute, you've come a bit too early. I've got this city that I've got to open. You know, there's an opening ceremony. Can you give me a few days? He said, no, you don't have this time. He said, at least give me a minute to come down from my horse. He was not given this opportunity, and his soul was taken away whilst in the state of arrogance. He passed away. This was a message for the people of Ad, yet they would not take heed, and they were punished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when He sent cold wind. Allah says in the Quran that this cold wind made them freeze, and they all froze to death. And this was Prophet Hud, ala nabiyyina wa ala alihi wa alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. He migrated to this area and he passed away. Next to him is buried Prophet Salih. And his community is Thamud. Likewise, his community had a particular relationship with mountains, and they were also of huge physique. And at the same time, they had 70 idols. They had plotted to kill Prophet Salih, yet their plot was, of course, revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they were not successful. One day they came to Prophet Salih and they said to him, you are calling people to the worship of the one God, and we are calling to the worship of our 70 idols. Let's have a confrontation, a sort of a mubahala, so to speak, in that day language, whereby we speak to your Lord and you speak to our gods. You ask them what you want, and we will ask your Lord what we want. Let's see who responds, so that people would see who's following the right path. Prophet Salih said, no problem, we'll do that. They gathered the people in a mountainous area, and they said to the people, this is what's going to happen. Prophet Salih said to them, who should start? They said, you should start. He came to their idols and said, I ask you, if you're truly gods to be worshipped and unworthy of obedience, just to answer me. That's it. That's all I want from you. Respond to me. That's all. Of course, nothing happened. Nothing can be heard. He said this 3 times. Nothing can be heard from the side of the idols. The people, the tribal leaders, looked within themselves, looked at Salih and said, there is a problem here. Give us a few minutes, let's sort our gods out. They went back and they said, we have to sort this problem out. What are we going to do? They returned and said, our gods are ready. Prophet Salih came back again, nothing happened. They said, fine, let's ask your Lord. Salih said, tell me, what is it that you wish to ask? They said, you know that mountain here in front of us? We want your Lord to bring out from the mountain a huge she-camel. Not only a she-camel, which is a normal she-camel. We want this she-camel to be pregnant. We want this 10 months pregnant. We want also this she-camel to be hairy and the hair to be red. And for it to be huge, to feed us all out of its milk. Let's see if God can do this. Salih said, this is impossible for me, yet it's very easy for my Lord. He responded, he prayed to Allah. Of course, this was the miracle of Prophet Salih. The mountain immediately started to shake and the camel emerged from the mountain and it was pregnant, and after a while they said to Salih, we want this camel to give birth. It gave birth also to the baby camel, and it fed the qawm of Thamud for a long time. There was a man by the name of Qaddar, according to the narration from Amir al-Mu'mineen. He was ashqa al-awwaleen, the most wretched of the people of the past. He plotted amongst some of the people of Thamud to kill the she-camel, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala specifically mentioned in the Quran that the camel was to be given one day to drink from the water in order to provide people with the milk, and another day would belong to the people of Thamud. Yet they would violate this type of agreement, and they would massacre and they would kill the she-camel in clear breach of the commands of the Almighty subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they would do the same for the young baby camel at the same time. This was perpetrated by the man by the name of Qaddar, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent wind, huge wind that destroyed their houses. Before that he informed them that you have 3 days to repent back. You have 3 days of an opportunity of tawbah. They would not do so. And then he informed Prophet Salih. Prophet Salih took his family, he left, and the community were destroyed and annihilated altogether. Later on, Prophet Salih migrates, he passes away, and he's buried just here according to many narrations. These two prophets of God, of course, there are many verses in the Quran. This is a brief description of their story. Many of the encounters, of the discussions they had are found in the Holy Quran. At the same time, in this cemetery, there are a number of scholars, esteemed religious ulama, who are buried here, and we should also remember. For instance, we have the teacher of Ayatullah Tabatabai, Sayyid Ali Qadi Tabatabai, from the great Urafa and the mystics. He is buried here. We have also from the contemporary scholars, Ayatullah al-Uthma al-Shaheed, Sayyid Mohammad al-Sadr, who was martyred in the year 1980. And he was one of the greatest scholars, philosophers, thinkers of the 20th century. He himself, alongside his sister, Bint al-Huda, Amin al-Sadr, were brought to the palaces of the dictator Saddam Hussein, and they were told to submit. They were told to do whatever the dictator wanted them to do. Those who were around and narrate the story, they say that they were both immersed and immediately in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They will not even raise their heads to look at the dictator, to the anger and the dismay of this wretched individual, who then ordered that they would be slayed exactly the way their grandfather Hussein ibn Ali was. Because I spoke to the individual who buried Sayyid al-Sadr, and he told me that when he was burying him and he was moving his body from one place to another, his body remained intact. And then when they moved his body several years ago to a shrine that they're constructing now, his body was as if it was fresh, it was as if he had been martyred now, and his head was severed, except there was a small part that was left. In other words, his whole head wasn't severed completely. This was a means by which this great marji' and a thinker and scholar was executed by the dictator alongside his sister, who was immersed in acid, and today there is no grave for her. Likewise, we find Ayatullah al-Uthma Sayyid Mohammad Sadiq al-Sadr, another great scholar, another great marji', who was executed and assassinated by the regime itself in 1998, alongside two of his sons, are also buried in Wadi-us-Salaam. There are many people here that if we wish to speak about them, their history, the stories that have happened here, the fact that the souls of the believers, brothers and sisters, and we end here, the souls of the believers, according to narrations, congregate in Wadi-us-Salaam due to its blessed nature. It is highly recommended for the mu'mineen to be buried in this blessed land and in this holy cemetery. So let's remember all the mu'mineen and the mu'minat, but before them the maraji' and the scholars, the Surah al-Mubarakah